Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for the delay. Just sharing the screen. Is the paragraph visible?
Yes,
Hello.
yes, it's visible.
Yes,
India.
it is.
So, as Yogesh ji suggested last time, we'll just read this again and then continue. So, somebody will read. India has from ancient times, this one. एक दो तीन चार ही लोग हैं कॉल पे. Shweta has not joined. Yogesh ji, will you read this?
I'm driving, Anmol. If you could
Acha.
request somebody else.
Archana ji, can you read this?
Yeah, I'll read.
Okay.
India has from ancient times held strongly a belief in the reality of the Avatara, the descent into form, the revelation of the Godhead in humanity. In the West, this belief has never really stamped itself upon the mind because it has been presented through exoteric Christianity as a theological dogma without any roots in the reason and general consciousness and attitude towards life. But in India, it has grown up and persisted as a logical outcome of the Vedantic view of life and taken firm root in the consciousness of the race. All existence is a manifestation of God because He is the only existence and nothing can be except as either a real figuring or else a figment of that one reality. Therefore, every conscious being is in part or in some way a descent of the infinite into the apparent finiteness of name and form. Every conscious being is in part or in some way a descent of the infinite into the apparent finiteness of name and form, but it is a veiled manifestation, and there is a gradation between the supreme being of the divine and the consciousness shrouded partly or wholly by ignorance of self in the finite. The conscious embodied soul is the spark of the divine fire, and that soul in man opens out to self knowledge as it develops out of ignorance of self into self being. The divine also, pouring itself into the forms of the cosmic existence, is revealed ordinarily in an efflorescence of its powers, in energies and magnitudes of its knowledge, love, joy, developed force of being, in degrees and phases of its divinity. But when the divine consciousness and power, taking upon itself the human form and the human mode of action, possesses it not only by powers and magnitudes, by degrees and outward phases of itself, but out of its eternal self knowledge. When the unborn knows itself and acts in the frame of the mental being and the appearance of birth, that is the height of the conditioned manifestation. It is the full and conscious descent of the Godhead. It is the Avatara.
Right. So, the distinction that he is making clearly, as I said last time, is that of between manifestation of divinity at all gradations and levels. Heightened manifestation is called vibhuti, but then, but when the, I mean, how to define it? The totality or that which alone is, that which is the all, जिसको सर्वम कहते हैं, when that itself takes on a form, a human form, it is called an avatar. इसके लिए the श्लोका फ्रॉम द गीता वाज 4.6. ठीक है, जैसे हमने किया था. अजोपि सन्नव्ययात्मा भूतानाम ईश्वरोपि सन् प्रकृतिम स्वाम अधिष्ठाय संभवामि आत्ममायया. Even though I am the unborn, and even though I am the imperishable self, and I am the great Lord of all beings. ठीक है. भूतानाम ईश्वरोपि सन् प्रकृतिम स्वाम अधिष्ठाय, presiding over my own prakriti. Sambhavami, I come into birth by Atma Maya. Maya being defined as the power of limitation. The divine is infinite by definition. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. This sort of sutra from the Taittiriya Upanishad we have been repeating in every class almost. But when that which is illimitable, okay, illimitable, it's not just infinite. It cannot be limited, because how can you limit infinity, the true infinity? But Maya is the means by which the infinite gives himself the appearance of finite. ठीक है. Appearance के लिए as if, ये दो words English के लिए as if, इसके लिए one of the Sanskrit words, at least in the Gita, that is uses iva. Okay. So avibhaktam cha bhuteshu vibhaktam iva cha sthitam. It is undivided but appears as if divided. It is illimitable, but it appears as if limited. From the point of view of concepts, as far as the study of Vedanta is concerned, this is something very important to understand. Also, to get rid of the wrong notion which has got attached with the word Maya, which means in the current context, a delusion and chalawa, deception and all that. That is not the original meaning of the word. The original meaning is basically the power of the divine of manifestation, and manifestation means limitation, right? So this is essentially what this paragraph is saying. Now, who else has joined? Can somebody read now, other than Archana ji, the next paragraph? The
Which one?
Vaishnava form of Vedantism.
Yeah.
Yes, Arpan, please.
एक सेकंड मैं थोड़ा दरवाजा बंद कर दूं, बाहर की आवाज आ रही है. The Vaishnava form of Vedantism, which has laid more stress upon this conception, expresses the relation of God in man to man in God by the double figure of Nar Narayan, associated historically with the origin of a religious school very similar in its doctrines to the teaching of the Gita. Nara is the human soul, which eternal companion of the divine, finds itself only when it awakens to that companionship and begins, as the Gita would say, to live in God. Narayana is the divine soul, always present in humanity, the secret guide, friend, and helper of the human being, the Lord who abides within the heart of all creatures of the Gita. When within us the veil of that secret sanctuary is withdrawn and man speaks face to face with God, hears the divine voice, receives the divine light, acts in the divine power, then becomes possible the supreme uplifting of the embodied human conscious being into the unborn and eternal. He becomes capable of that dwelling in God and giving up of his whole consciousness into the divine, which the Gita upholds as the best or the highest secret of things, Uttamam Rahasyam. When this eternal divine consciousness, always present in every human being, this God in man, takes possession partly or wholly of the human consciousness and becomes invisible human shape, the guide, teacher, leader of the world, not as those who living in their humanity yet feel something of the power or light or love of the divine gnosis, informing and conducting them, but out of the divine gnosis itself, direct from its central force and plenitude. Then we have the manifest avatar. The inner divinity is the eternal avatar in man. The human manifestation is its sign and development in the external world.
Thank you. So again, quite a packed paragraph in terms of content, useful for our study and clearing of concepts. The Vaishnava form of Vedantism, which has laid most stress upon this conception, expresses. So when it goes, Vedantism when we say like this. I mean, Vedanta, as I have said earlier, if you want to define it most extensively, then there is the three scriptures of Vedanta. Prasthana Traya bolte hain. Probably the word Prasthana has got attached to it. Traya means three, because the idea was to depart from the world by following the teaching. This is my, I mean, educated or semi-educated guess. Them being the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and what is called the Brahma Sutras. Okay, these are the three main texts of Vedanta. But in general, if you just want to take in one word, then Vedanta means Upanishads. Okay, here again, though he is just using the word Vedanta, but what is really implied by the use of the word Vedanta is actually the word Advait. ठीक है, non-dualism. एक ये सूत्र है, 4 words. This comes in the Chandogya Upanishad also, and there is an Upanishad written by Sri Aurobindo. It begins with that. Ekam eva advitiyam brahma. संधि में एकम एवा द्वितीयम ब्रह्म. Okay. इसका एक और होता है, I'm just very very basic things I'm saying. सर्वम खलविदम ब्रह्म, 3.14.1 of the Upanishads. But उसमें, I mean, just a little going into the technicality of Sanskrit. Sarvam, all, khalu, indeed, idam, this Brahman. So that idam, this जो है ना, उससे again the meaning can get a little narrowed. Whereas in ekameva dvitiyam brahma, there is Brahman alone. केवल एक वो ब्रह्म है, there is nothing else. एकम एव अद्वितीयम ब्रह्म. श्री अरविंदो जी लिखते हैं नान्यत किंचिद अस्ति, there is nothing else. Okay, this has to be meditated upon. In fact, in one of his letters, Sri Aurobindo gives this as the best idea on which to meditate, because this is the most complete idea. There is nothing else, that other than which there is nothing else. Okay, ekameva dvitiyam brahma nanyat kinchit asti. Arpan, raising your hand, you have a question?
Maybe accidentally. I don't know how to even raise my hand on Zoom.
Acha, accidentally. Okay. So,
Yes, okay.
So the Vaishnava form of Vedantism. Okay. Naturally, I mean that one reality, when it is conceived of as Vishnu, when it is, taken in that, if you say that in the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, for example, the word Rudra or something like this comes. So it is a reference to Shiva. Okay. Now, in the other major Upanishads, I don't remember reading the name of Vishnu that way. By the major, I mean Isha, Kena, Katha, Mundaka, Mandukya, Prashna, Aitareya, Taittiriya, Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka, Shvetashvatara, and Kaivalya. Isme, I don't remember coming across the word Narayana or the word Vishnu as such. But I mean, if we are not so fixated upon just considering the Upanishads as Vedanta, and for example, in this book itself, Sri Aurobindo says that the Gita is considered almost as a 13th Upanishad. Okay? For all practical purposes, Gita is also considered as an Upanishad. Okay? There is no real doubt about this. Shruti bolte hain. Shruti is another synonym for Upanishads used in the tradition, right? So, acha, why almost, he says? Why almost? Because if you remember in the first chapter, he says the Upanishads ka jo synthesis hai, that is the spiritual synthesis, whereas the synthesis that is used in the Gita is spiritual as well as intellectual. So the difference is basically that the language of the Gita has an intellectual component, whereas the language of the Upanishads is mostly running at a high spiritual plane. It does not really come down to the level of the intellect. So Upanishads, and I had shared that one paragraph, what defines an Upanishad, right? So in that he says that, there is a certain language, and that beauty of language, that high strung vibration in the language, it is that which basically qualifies a text to be called an Upanishad. And in the great Upanishads, you find that extraordinary quality of poetry, language, vibration. मतलब कैसे बोले आप, झंझना जाएंगे बिल्कुल उसको पढ़ करके. If you memorize, let's say, a few verses of the Isha Upanishad, and you just chant them, you will feel the vibration in yourself, right? So that's why. But I mean, too much time is being spent on this. The Vaishnava form of Vedantism. Okay? Gita, for example, is the Vaishnava form of Vedantism, which has laid most stress upon this conception. In the Shaivism, for example, they say that Shiva has not really incarnated in a full incarnation. That is the belief. And if there is no full incarnation, then, where is the avatarhood? There are great vibhutis of Shiva. So Hanuman is supposed to be a great vibhuti of Shiva. Shankaracharya is supposed to be a great vibhuti. Swami Vivekananda in the modern times, he is supposed to be a great vibhuti. There are others. You can go on Google and there are like some 20, 24 avatars of Shiva mentioned. I think Gorakshanath is one and all that. But avatar word is not used for them, right? So that word is used mostly in the Vaishnava form of Vedantism. And probably the reason is that Vishnu is supposed to be the one who is supposed to be preserving. तो वो जो प्रिजर्वेशन के लिए एक्शन नेसेसरी है एंड टेकिंग अ फॉर्म, दैट इज द जॉब ऑफ विष्णु, एंड दैट इज व्हाई probably it is the Vaishnava form of Vedantism. But this is a significant phrase. This is a significant phrase as far as the understanding of the culture and how the idea of avatarhood has evolved, how the ideas of the Gita itself have evolved. From that point of view, this phrase needs to be sort of underlined in our mind. The Vaishnava form of Vedantism. All right. So the Vaishnava form of Vedantism, which has laid most stress upon this conception. Which conception? The conception of avatarhood. Okay? Expresses the relation of God in man. God in man. Okay? What I had called the third status of the supermind. जिससे कि वो द्वैत भक्ति आए मध्वाचार्य वाली. ठीक है? To man in God. Man being in God. उसके लिए गीता का आई थिंक 9.6 वी हैड कोटेड, यथा काशस्थितो नित्यम वायु सर्वत्र गो महान, दैट एग्जांपल, राइट? टू मैन इन गॉड बाय द डबल फिगर ऑफ नर नारायण, associated historically with the origin of a religious school very similar in its doctrines to the teaching of the Gita. Now, exactly what this religious school is and what were its tenets and all that, I'm not really aware. It must have taken form, as I guess, concretely after the departure of Krishna and Arjuna. In fact, इसमें एक जगह आएगा, Arjuna was also worshipped, not just Krishna. Even Arjuna was worshipped. Arjuna is regarded as Nara, if you read the Mahabharata, and Krishna is regarded as Narayana. In fact, the very first shloka of Mahabharata, Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayet. Doing namaskar to Narayana as well as Nara, because Arjuna is the main protagonist of the Mahabharata. This also should not be forgotten conceptually, at least. Krishna is not the protagonist because he is not in the front. He's like the soul of it. He's like the इसमें है ना guide and master and all that. But वो पीछे है, background में है. He doesn't really take up the arms and fight, which the Arjuna does, right? One second. Hello. I am sorry for the interruption. So, associated historically with the origin of a religious school, very similar in its doctrines to the teaching of the Gita. Isme, if I get more information, I'll share. But as of now, I mean, I have to say that मुझे पता नहीं है about this religious school and exactly what it was. Okay. Nara is the human soul, right? Now, इसमें the oldest Vedic word, shortest form में जो आता है, the word is simply Nri. English में अगर आप लिखेंगे N-R-I, like this, Nri, that means man. The corresponding word for the feminine in the Veda, the oldest Vedic Sanskrit is Gna. Simply itna. I read this in the Secret of the Veda, G-N-A. So the feminine is termed as Gna. The masculine का सबसे छोटा word, oldest, is Nri. उस Nri को उसमें suffix लगा करके it becomes Nara. All right. So Nara is the human soul, which, eternal companion of the divine, finds itself only when it awakens to that companionship and begins, as the Gita would say, to live in God. Very important. Unless it finds God, right? What does it say? Finds only when it awakens to that companionship. Isme bhi again, if you say Nara is the human soul, what is meant by the word soul here? Because soul by definition is supposed to be something beyond human. Then if you are using the adjective human before the word soul, what exactly do you mean? Okay. So here, I mean, this is more than an educated guess. This is right, I think. See, as Sri Aurobindo explains, there is the Purusha. Okay. Conceptually, what I am saying is something very important. Therefore, attention to be paid and some time to be given to this. Purusha is that which alone is, Purushat na param kinchit, sa kashtha, sa paragatihi. And basically, Brahma ki jagah we can use the word Purusha. Purusha alone is, there is nothing else other than the Purusha. It is the highest, it is everything, etc., etc. But just one word I am saying, Purusha. Okay. When that Purusha becomes individualized, you can call it Jiva Purusha. Individual ke liye the Sanskrit word is Jiva. Okay. Normally it is called Jivatman, but we can also call it Jiva Purusha, doesn't matter. 15.7 में गीता यही यूज करती है, ममई वामशो जीव लोके जीव भूतः sanatana. It becomes the individual Purusha. Okay. Then when in the human structure that Purusha is organized, it is organized in this way कि in the innermost being, there is the innermost being, there is the inner being, and then there is the outer being. All right. पहले तो ये समझना. Sri Aurobindo says that there is this, again, this is very important for those who have not heard this before. The being is organized in two ways, like concentric circles, which goes in the inner dimension, and like steps, which goes in the upper dimension. Okay. So there is the inmost being, then there is the inner being, then there is the outer being. Okay. In the inmost being, the Purusha is called Chaitya Purusha, what we call psychic being. Okay. This psychic being, to organize the outer being, in the inner being, this psychic being manifests itself as three Purushas: Manomaya Purusha, Pranamaya Purusha, Annamaya Purusha. Right? So now to near to the far, let's say our mind. Okay. So the movements of our mind, movement is all Prakriti, right? But that which is watching the movements of our mind, that part of our mind is called the Manomaya Purusha. Okay. Soul jo word hai, the closest equivalent Sanskrit word for that is Purusha. So when you say the human soul, most likely what you mean by that word is the Manomaya Purusha. Or if you want to take it as a whole, then you can take the Chaitya, but then Chaitya is already divine. It cannot be called human. It's already the divine. It comes into the human world, but it remains immortal and all that. So either you can take the Manomaya, the Pranamaya, and the Annamaya as a whole and call that the human soul, or strictly speaking, because human means mind and that mental element, so human soul means the Manomaya Purusha. In fact, in one of the Upanishads, Mundaka Upanishad, Manomaya Purushaha Prana Sharira Neta. This is the Sanskrit. So it is the Manomaya Purusha, which is the leader of the life and the body, means the energetic element and the pure physical element. And basically it is the leader. वहां पे वो psychic तक नहीं गए हैं उसमें. The true leader is the psychic being. But obviously it begins with the Manomaya Purusha. In most with that mental seeking and that mental control over the basic animal nature. Otherwise, it is difficult to get to the psychic. Okay. So this much just for understanding clearly what he means by the human soul. Okay. The adjective human being used in front of the word soul. So Nara is the human soul, which eternal companion of the divine. Eternal companion. The divine cannot find himself without the human. Remember those lines from Savitri. A mutual debt binds man to the supreme. The debt is mutual. हमारा उसके प्रति है, उसका भी हमारे प्रति है. There is a mutual dependence. In this world of man, of course, in his highest plane, the divine does not need anybody, nothing. He's totally free, and he's free even not to create. But we are already sitting in the creation. So where we are sitting in what is called creation, or better put, manifestation, there is this dependency of the divine on the human element to grow. Last time, I think I had quoted that colloquy of Indra and Agastya, okay, as an example. Ki Agastya, through the use of Indra, which is basically the enlightened mind, he reaches a state of liberation, and then he wants to shoot off. So Indra says, no, 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 no. What about me? What about my fulfillment? So of course, Indra is not the supreme, but for that purpose, it can be taken as a divine. तो उस divine के उस part के fulfillment के लिए the human is needed, which is why Indra comes and tells Agastya, कि please take me along. Don't be selfish. I have helped you to reach liberation. Now what about my fulfillment? Okay. It's getting a little heavy, I know. I'll just pause after 1 or 2 minutes. So Nara is the human soul, which eternal companion of the divine finds itself only when it awakens to that companionship. Right? इसके लिए जो गीता का श्लोक है, at least one, it is 5.29. Okay. Suhridam sarvabhutanam, the friend of all. Okay. That is how the divine is defined there. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam jnatva mam shantim richati. यहाँ पे भी वही बोल रहे हैं. So as the enjoyer, bhoktaram yajna tapasam, of all yajna and tapas. What we are doing right now is called in the Gita jnana yajna. ठीक है? This what we are doing right now, this kind of swadhyay, इसको गीता के 4th chapter में jnana yajna बोलते हैं. Who is the enjoyer of that? It is the divine. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam. Yes, just 1 minute. I'll just finish this shloka, then you can come. Bhoktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram, the great lord of all beings. Suhridam sarva bhutanam. Suhrid matlab hrid se aata hai, literally means that which is closer to your heart. Friend, basically. Here the word that has been used so far is companion of all beings, the friend of all creatures. Oft used phrase by Sri Aurobindo at least 3-4 times in his writings. Jnatva mam. When you have known me as such. Jnatva means having known. Mam means me. So Krishna says, when you have known me as this. यहीं पे जो आया ना कि when it awakens to that companionship, then only basically it starts to live in God. Then that shanti comes. Jnatva mam shantim richati. Basically, unless you realize that God alone is your eternal companion, you cannot really have peace. So yes, Yogesh bhai, tell me. As it is, I was going to pause. Yes.
You said innermost, inner and outer. You said, look, it's very important to understand these three.
Yes.
And then the innermost, you said, is these 3 koshas.
Now, innermost is that innermost, actually, I mean, if you see Dalal's book on planes and parts of the mind, ek hai a compilation, there he says there is an inmost mind, inmost vital and inmost physical. वो उतना लेवल तक जाते हैं, बट मैं वहां नहीं जा रहा था. I was simply, जिसको अंतरात्मन बोलते हैं, अंतरात्मा बोलते हैं इंडिया में नॉर्मली, that is what Sri Aurobindo calls Chaitya Purusha, Sanskrit word. हालांकि the English word most common he has used is psychic being. It is your inmost being and it is in constant connection with the divine.
Okay. So I thought that the Vigyanmay, the 4th kosha, is always aware of the...
It is a combination of Vigyanmay and Anandmay.
Okay, fair enough.
If you, it's not exactly like this. See, psychic is defined as Anand. Okay. मैं आपको बता, आपका क्वेश्चन बहुत वैलिड है. जो आउटर बीइंग है ना, प्योर स्थूल शरीर, उसको हालांकि एक्चुअली ट्रूली स्पीकिंग दे आर डिफरेंट, मतलब वो ऑर्गेनाइजेशन डिफरेंट है. जो अन्नमय प्राणमय वगैरह है ना, इट इज डिफरेंट. हाँ, वील कम टू इट. यस, उसमें क्या होता है कि जो अन्नमय प्राणमय है एज अ होल, दैट इज कॉल्ड स्थूला, एंड स्थूला वुड बेसिकली मीन द आउटर. Manomaya is called Sukshma, which would roughly mean the inner. Roughly बोल रहा हूं, it's not exact correlation. And जो विज्ञानमय आनंदमय है, that is called the Karana. So that is the thing because of which everything else happens. That would be the inmost being, that would be the psychic being. मतलब this is a rough correlation. Exact correlation, we will have to find out. Arpan, you
Right,
have
because-
something to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as the horizontal stratification goes, that you have explained, I think fine. The only thing that I would like to add is that Sukshma also includes vital as well as mental.
Yes, why? That's why I said it's a rough thing.
Yes.
It's a rough thing.
Okay. The other thing was that as far as psychic being is concerned, I don't think we should map it to Ananda or anything.
नहीं, we should not. नहीं.
Yeah,
Why?
it should.
Actually,
It's a drop of
मैं समझ गया. Yes.
It's a drop of the divine, and divine has been categorized. I think that this is also a mental categorization. It's
I'll just say
divided
this
into
कि
Ananda.
Life Divine में page 278 पे there is a table made by Sri Aurobindo where he himself maps the psychic being to the Ananda principle. So when I said what I said, that is what I had in mind. ठीक है?
Yeah, but
आप जो कह रहे हैं उसमें वो addition ऐसे होगा कि for example it is a spark of the divine fire, right? So the divine fire is basically the चित तपस. तो फिर वो वैसे आ जाएगा उसके अंदर.
Yeah, I mean all these three. I know
They are
what
there in
Aurobindo-
that. So it is
Yeah.
wrong to call it just Ananda. That
Let me complete. So
Yes, please. Yes.
what I mean to say is that I know what Sri Aurobindo has written, but Sri Aurobindo, how does he define Ananda, Sat, Chit, and Ananda? He defines them as the triune principles.
Exactly.
Not even triple principles. Triune means they are literally the same things viewed through three different sides.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
So-
since Yogesh Bhai had mentioned Vijnana Kosha and Ananda Kosha, that is why I tried to make that correlation.
Yes.
Because जो ऊपर के जो दो कोश हैं, they are not even mentioned ना. जो चित कोश है, सत कोश है, they are supposed to be developed as the evolution progresses. Shri
Yeah,
Aurobindo-
developed on the terrestrial sphere. Otherwise,
Yes,
there are
yes.
already beings.
Yes, they are there, pre-existent, but they have to be organized in the human manifestation.
Yes.
Okay, चलो. So, any other question? Because बहुत लंबा हो गया था, and some people. Any question anybody has before we move further in this paragraph? Feel free to ask. It's a very informal sort of. No? Chalo. Then we'll continue. So Nara is the human soul, which eternal companion of the divine finds itself only when it awakens to that companionship and begins, as the Gita would say, to live in God. Live in God का जो गीता का reference है, that is 12.7. ठीक है? ये finds itself और your companionship वाला जो part है, इसका reference है 5.29. ठीक है? Which I have already quoted. Now moving forward. Narayana is the divine soul, capital S, always present in our humanity. Okay? The secret guide, friend, and helper of the human. It is constantly helping us. This is most generally recognized as that inner voice जिसको बोलते हैं. This is how it is perceived, I should say. Most common perception जो है इसका. As it progresses, it can become a more and more clear voice. Okay? Narayana is the divine soul always present in our humanity, the secret guide, friend, and helper of the human being, the Lord who abides within the heart of creatures. ये incarnate word पे the shloka number is also given, 18.61. Ishvaraha sarvabhutanam hriddeshe tishtati. This is the Sanskrit that is translated here into English. Ishvaraha meaning Lord, abides mane tishtati, within the heart of creatures. Hriddeshe sarvabhutana, right? When within us the veil of that secret sanctuary is withdrawn. Now it is there, okay, but it is secret. That is why हृददेश जो है ना, that sacred space बोलते हैं या heart space बोलते हैं, sanctuary यहाँ बोल रहे हैं. It is secret. It is something that has to be opened and experienced. मतलब fastest way if somebody has to ask अगर वो करना है, it is to concentrate in the heart region with an aspiration obviously for the feeling of the presence in the heart, feeling that Ishvara in the heart. Very clearly इसमें श्री अरविंदो की greatness एक ये है, among other things, defining things very, very clearly, even in such a difficult subject as spirituality, right? So when within us the veil of that secret sanctuary is withdrawn. Again, if you see the word veil, मैंने एक वो quote डाला था उसमें, a veil behind the heart, ये वही है. A lid above the mind divides us from the divine. Love and devotion rend the veil. ठीक है? In fact, I'm going to make a statement here after ये वाला sentence खत्म हो जाता है. A veil behind the heart, a lid over the mind divides us from the divine. Love and devotion rend the veil. In the quietude of the mind, the lid thins and vanishes. It's one of those golden sentences of Sri Aurobindo, very useful and very practical for realization, basically. When within us the veil of that secret sanctuary is withdrawn, जब वो पर्दा हटता है, and man speaks face to face with God. गीता का जो वो आता है, क्या कहते हैं, प्रेयर, उसमें यम ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्र रुद्र मरुतः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः सांगपदक्रमोपनिषदैः गायन्ति यं सामगाः ध्यानावस्थित तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो. In the state of dhyana, the yogis see that. ध्यानावस्थित तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यांतं न विदुः सुरासुरगणाः देवाय तस्मै नमः. Whose end neither the gods or the asuras know. To that Deva I do namaskar. But that Deva, what does the shloka say? Pashyanti, dhyanavasthita. ध्यान की अवस्था में उसको देखा जाता है. It is important to at least have in mind this clarity. I must see it. I must see it. उसका vision होना जरूरी है. It can be in the form of a light. It can be in the form that is dear to you, चतुर्भुज रूप होता है जैसे. But this much should be clear to the साधक कि उसको देखना है. Vision, जब तक vision being our chief sense, unless we see it, we can never really be satisfied. The human consciousness cannot be satisfied. तो इसीलिए वो यहाँ पे बोल रहे हैं, man speaks face to face with God when that secret sanctuary's veil is withdrawn. Hears the divine voice, receives the divine light, acts in the divine power. Then becomes possible the supreme uplifting of the embodied human conscious being into the unborn and eternal. I feel the need to read this sentence again once more, slowly. When within us the veil of that secret sanctuary is withdrawn and man speaks face to face with God. In Sri Aurobindo's letter to his wife, जो वो Three Madnesses के नाम से publish हुआ था बाद में, famous हुआ था rather. This is one of his madnesses. If God exists, I want to see him face to face. And then he did all kinds of effort. 5 hours pranayam, japa, I am sure he did. Concentration, I am sure he did. All those sorts of things he did for 4 years before he met Lele, right? Face to face, hears the divine voice. Again, I'm just being reminded of वो आ रहा है ऐसे करके. In the letters, he speaks about Krishna. He says you can hear him. You can see him. At one place, he even hints about his beauty. You can hear him. In fact, in the life of Sri Aurobindo, it's an occasion to share this. When he got the Adesh to go to Chandarnagar first and then to Pondicherry, what are the words he uses? In a voice well known to me. Exact phrase hai. In a voice well known to me, I got the Adesh, go to Pondicherry. So it became that familiar, it became well known. I mean, this is the stages of communion that we need to reach, just to, reiterate these things. Hears the divine voice, receives the divine light, acts in the divine power. Then becomes possible the supreme uplifting of the embodied human conscious being into the unborn and eternal. This is the divine birth of all of us. ये जो दिव्यम जन्म है जो human being का हूँ, right? Now इसमें एक जो मुझे बोला था कि I would like to make a statement here. The way he is using the word Narayana here for the Ishvara within, okay, and the idea of the veil being withdrawn and all that, I feel this very strongly, and I can say that partly I have experienced it also. I can add this much also here. Simply the japa of the word Narayana. Narayana kya hai? Narayana you can take as the sangya of the inner divine. ठीक है? संज्ञा शब्द की परिभाषा मैंने पहले भी बताई थी. सम्यक ज्ञायते. ठीक है? When something is totally known, जब किसी चीज को पूरी तरह जान लिया जाता है, तब उसको जो टर्म दिया जाता है उसको कहते हैं संज्ञा. ओके, सो नारायण is, I would like to say, the संज्ञा of the inner divine, of the ईश्वरा within. Probably जो अपने कल्चर के अंदर नारद मुनि की इमेज है, just chanting one word, nothing else. Narayana, I might add here for those who are having more faith and devotion in Sri Aurobindo and Mother that way. Mother in the agenda says at one place that among the mantras that came to her naturally, one of them was Narada's mantra. And उसके बाद वो आता है वहां पे Narayana, Narayana like this. All I'm trying to say is just this simple practice of chanting the word Narayana, thinking of the Lord within our heart, this itself simply can be sufficient to remove that veil from the secret sanctuary and have us have the darshan of that Ishvara within us. Okay. I mean, don't want to share too many personal details, but I have done this for about 5-6 months back in 2006-07, and some sort of a glimpse was given. There were other words. Narayana was not the only word I was using, but it was the word which was being most frequently coming in that group of words. Jo naam karma use kar raha tha, sequence, it was there around 5 months. So I'm saying this from experience also. And in fact, tab ye sab nahi socha tha. When I read this, then I realized that probably this is how it connects. Okay. So he becomes capable of that dwelling in God and giving up of his whole consciousness into the divine, which the Gita upholds as the best or highest secret of things. Right? Giving up of his whole consciousness into the divine, capable of dwelling in God. वही जो giving up तो ultimately आता ही है उसमें. मन मना भव मद भक्तो मद्याजी माम नमस्कुरु. 18.65. Become my minded, be devoted to me, do namaskar to me, become full of me basically. Mad chitta, mad gata prana, man mana, mad bhakta, all that mat mat के बाद जो words लगाते हैं, the consciousness becoming full of the divine and nothing but the divine. Right? This is the Gita's demand. This is the goal offered by the Gita, you can say. Okay. Uttamam Rahasyam 4.3. When this eternal divine consciousness, again C capital, always present in every human being, this God in man, Ved में इसके लिए मतलब one of the words that is used is phrases is Martyeshu Amritam. अब उसमें Martyeshu Daivam है या नहीं, this I would not be able to say. Exact Martyeshu Amritam, this much I remember, which simply means the immortal immortals. ये जो mortal दिख रहा है, इसके अंदर एक immortal है. ठीक है. गीता में 13th chapter में very powerful श्लोका, मतलब almost it challenges you कि अगर तुम अपने आप को आंख वाला समझते हो, तो this is the real definition of having eyes. Okay? समम सर्वेषु भूतेषु तिष्ठन्तं परमेश्वरम विनश्यत्स्व विनश्यन्तं यः पश्यति सपश्यति. Number इसका है I think 13.18. I'll just confirm. That will also give a slight gap for absorbing. 13.13, not 18, sorry. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu is okay, I'll share it later on. Number I'm not able to find right now. (13.28) actually. 13th chapter में कई बार first verse is excluded from many versions, जो अर्जुना वाचा वाला question है. Otherwise it would be 27. ठीक है. समम सर्वेषु भूतेषु, equally in all beings. समम सर्वेषु भूतेषु तिष्ठन्तं, established. Parameshwaram, the supreme Lord. Vinashyatsu, in the perishable, avinashyantam, the imperishable. विनश्यत्सु का मतलब है in the perishable, ठीक है, षष्ठी बहुवचन. विनश्यत्सु अविनश्यंतम यह पश्यति सपश्यति. इन सिंपल वर्ड्स, ही जो देखता है कि वो परमेश्वर समान रूप से सारे भूतों के अंदर विद्यमान है, वह जो कि इन सब विनाशवान चीजों में अविनाशी है, ही इज द पर्सन हु इज सेड टू बी सीइंग. यह पश्यति सपश्यति. सो दिस इज नॉट द रियल विजन कि मुझे आंखों से दिखाई देता है तो मैं देख रहा हूं. In the Gita's perspective, this is when you can call yourself someone having a vision. This is the real vision and sense of the Gita. When you can perceive that imperishable in all perishable things, when you can see that supreme Ishvara, Parameshwaram, dwelling equally in all existences, बिना किसी भेद बुद्धि के. Right? इसमें भी एक जगह मतलब अगेन यू कैन जस्ट मल्टीप्लाई गीता के श्लोक ऐसे बोल सकते हैं. विद्या विनय संपन्ने ब्राह्मणे गविहस्तिनि शुनि चैव श्वपाके च पंडिताः समदर्शिनः. कि ब्राह्मण एंडाउड विद विद्या एंड विनय, विद्या विनय संपन्न, विद्या और विनय से संपन्न ब्राह्मण, राइट. ब्राह्मणे गविहस्तिनि, इन अ काउ, इन अ elephant, female elephant. Shuni, in a dog. Shvapaka. Shvapaka literally means dog eater actually. Literally that is what it means. Chandala basically. Shvapakecha. Even in such a person, imagine a dog eater. This is the Gita's challenge thrown to you. Panditaha samadarshinaha. जो रियल पंडित की डेफिनेशन है समदर्शी. He sees all of them with the same दृष्टि. विद्या विनय संपन्न ब्राह्मण, विद्या विनय संपन्ने ब्राह्मणे गविहस्तिनि शुनि चैव श्वपाके च पंडिताः समदर्शिनः. That Parameshwaram dwelling equally in all existences. When you see that imperishable in all these perishable things, then you can be said to be a seer. Yah pashyati sapashyati. I mean, these are some very powerful shlokas, worth memorizing, worth repeating. And Sri Aurobindo has said, I'll share the exact reference, कि if the verses of the Gita are repeated, उनका जप यदि किया जाए with the intention of realizing their meaning, they have that inherent power कि merely by the japa of that, of course, some mental concentration and heart concentration would be required. You can get the realization that is there in that verse. उसका जो तथ्य है, आपको उसका spiritual realization हो जाएगा. It is there in a letter of Sri Aurobindo, right? So therein lies the utility of quoting these verses and, all that. 8:59. We had started at 8:12 today. If somebody needs to drop off at 9, last ka 10 minutes, they can see in the recording. I'll try to have the 1 hour full, be fair, right? So when this eternal divine consciousness always present in every human being, this God in man takes possession partly or wholly of the human consciousness. Partly or wholly. In Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, for example, it is said to be partly. At times he was taken complete possession by Krishna and he would behave and act like Krishna. At other times he would be simply Nimai Pandit. मैं केवल एक भक्त हूं and I am just a lover of Krishna, nothing more than that, right? So that is one example that comes to mind. Or wholly of the human consciousness and becomes invisible human shape. Invisible human shape. The guide, teacher, leader of the world. We'll finish the sentence, then we'll come to our point. Not as those who living in their humanity. See, this is the difference. Living in their humanity, yet feel something of the power or light or love of the divine process. That is not sufficient to be called an avatar. आप एक योगी, एक साधक भी इस स्टेट में पहुंच सकता है where you are still human. You are feeling something of the power or light or love of the divine gnosis. Gnosis is basically, the word jnana and the word gnosis are etymologically linked. Basically, it means the Sri Aurobindo के terms में the truth consciousness, the supermind, जहां से सारा creation हुआ है, right? The all knowledge basically. Gnosis means that the all knowledge from where the creation happens, right? Informing and conducting them, but out of that divine gnosis itself. Here, basically, the difference is being made out, like in the previous paragraph, between merely a manifestation or a special manifestation like a vibhuti, or even a very great vibhuti like Swami Vivekananda or Shankaracharya, etc., for that matter, and the avatar himself. out of that divine gnosis itself, direct from its central force and plenitude, then we have the manifest avatar. Here, since I'm mentioning Swamiji Vivekanand, I might say that Sri Aurobindo, throughout in his writings almost, he calls Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa as an avatar. This is the word he uses for Ramakrishna Paramahansa. In my understanding, he is an incarnation of Vishnu. It was the Vishnu aspect, because on his deathbed he said, he who was Rama and Krishna is in this body as Ramakrishna. And the common link between Rama and Krishna is Vishnu. So that is my understanding. But Ramakrishna is regarded as an avatar by Sri Aurobindo. Okay? A very great avatar, obviously. The word that is used for him is avatar, since we are, on the avatar paragraphs. Then we have the manifest avatar. Now, the inner divinity is the eternal avatar in man. ये जो phrase है ना, eternal avatar, this is very important. पिछले क्लास का और इस क्लास का सबसे important जो phrase है वो ये है. That avatar which comes or which came, Sri Aurobindo was born in 1872, Krishna, Rama and all that, that is fine. But the thing that matters to you and me constantly is this eternal avatar, this eternal companion, the divine within us. Okay? The immanent lives in man as in his house. The inner divinity, again D capital, is the eternal avatar in man. See, again, the word eternal avatar is a sort of, you can say, a oxymoron. Because avatar is supposed to be in time. वो आया, वो descend किया. Then how are you calling it an eternal avatar? You are calling it an eternal avatar because पूरे matter के अंदर that divine presence is there. And that original, वो जो diffused presence थी under the inconscient, that has evolved to the level of a psychic being in human beings. And that is the avatar, that is the divine within, which is guiding everybody constantly. Okay? The inner divinity is the eternal avatar in man. The human manifestation is its sign and development in the external world. When, abhi aage ja karke aayega, not here, in the later chapters, कि when that eternal divinity, when it takes a manifest human form, गीता में जो phrase है, manushim tanum ashritam, then you have the manifest avatar. Then you have Rama, then you have Krishna, then you have Sri Aurobindo. This is the only difference. That Krishna, Rama, Sri Aurobindo, that supreme divine, देहे अस्मिन पुरुषः परः, गीता के 13.23 में आता है. इस देह में the supreme Purusha himself is there. उपद्रष्टा अनुमंता च भर्ता भोक्ता महेश्वरः परमात्मेति चाप्युक्तो देहे अस्मिन पुरुषः परः. उसके सारे वो poises उसमें दिए हुए हैं. Witness, sanction giver, great lord, etc., etc. This is there. 9.4. Yeah, Arpan had a question. Sorry, Arpan, had to make you wait.
Yeah, I've so this is just tangential to what you were talking about. So you mentioned Chaitanya Mahaprabhu going into these two kinds of modes. Yeah, so this is a bit more personal to me. My grouch with this method, chanting and all the methods which are symptomatic of bhakti, not necessarily core of bhakti, are that how do you how do you ensure that this is working in the right direction? Because let's say you have hear me out. I know it sounds very intellectual, but I'm talking from personal experience. So let's say you take a hardcore Vedantic method or a Buddhist method. So let's say you are just watching your mind. So by the very logic of things, by the very mechanical system of Prakriti, if you're watching, the thing will settle down. You see, and peace, an experience of peace would come, and there's no element of faith in it. I think faith is of a very abstract kind here. Faith is that when you pursue this method over a decade or 2 decades, through all the hardships of your life, ups and downs of your life, people don't tend to continue anything for so long, and for that you need that kind of maturity and faith that if I continue with this long enough, this would settle down. Like my mind would finally one day settle down. This is probably the light faith you need, but this is a very faith based method. If you're chanting and there is no, how do I explain this, there is no logical correlation between you doing this and the realization there. So it's very easy to get diverted into, okay, there are many people who have bhakti towards Krishna and all they do is, what people do what people do in ISKCON.
What can happen is, for example, that especially
I just want to ensure that you understood the part.
Yes.
That you already see what people do in ISKCON. Many people, I mean, they have absolutely no concept of realization. What they do is
Yes, yes.
goon like they will just start jumping and dancing. There is no
I understand what you're
place
saying.
for
I understand
stability.
what you're saying. I understand
Yes,
what you're saying. Now,
yes.
what I want to say is कि जैसे there are 3 levels of japa. Okay.
Yeah.
वाचिक जो होता है, क्या बोलते हैं उसको, वैखरी, then there is upamsu, and then there is the manasik. It's obvious that the manasik is the most powerful for the inner realization. When you are doing it manasik तरीके से जब आप कर रहे हैं, first of all you can observe वो जो witness वाला part है, that can witness you, मतलब you can witness yourself doing this, number one. Second, as this goes along, you start getting the feeling that actually I am not doing it. There is some force, there is some, I am getting some help from within, and it is because of this help that this thing is going on.
Just to ask one thing here also. So I have also experienced this a lot. A mantra takes a life of its own, but I doubt whether it's something so high that some higher power is doing it. I think it's just that the mind gets mechanically habituated to repeating it.
That may be the case.
Yes,
that may be the case,
or maybe what I am experiencing here is not the ajapa jap of the Gita, or sorry, of our scriptures, because mantra repeating itself is very easy. You do it for 2 hours and it would, like tinnitus, it would get stuck in your head.
With the ajapa japana, for example, मतलब of course one has to be slightly aware of the soul within oneself.
Yes.
अगर कोई यही नहीं जानता कि उसके अंदर इतनी सारी चीजों में से सोल कौन सी है, तो then little work needs to be done.
मेरा यहाँ से ना, ये आपसे मेरा पहले भी डिस्कशन हुआ है.
मैं आपको उसमें नहीं कह रहा, मैं जस्ट एक बात बोल रहा हूँ.
नहीं मैं ये नहीं कह रहा, आप मुझे कह रहे हो, बट मेरा आपसे इसमें पहले भी डिस्कशन हुआ है जब हम चिदम्बरम जा रहे थे. So I think that soul को जानना, you are treating it as something very basic. I treat it as something very high. I don't think an average person or even a slightly developed person knows a soul, because
now this is
you
what
can
I'm saying.
easily be mistaken by what.
Correct. But that soul, it is, at least in today's times, most easily it is perceived as that inner voice. ठीक है? And one can feel कि उसकी clarity जो inner voice की है वो बढ़ रही है कि घट रही है. All these things are, I mean, ये अंदर की बातें हैं, as you say, तो फिर किसी और को convince किया जाए. But I can say this much कि let's say वो नारायण वाली बात करूं, जो मैंने एक practical tip दिया है इसमें. If you do it silently within yourself, you can start feeling that it is the Narayana within you who is actually supporting you, propping you up from within to be able to do it constantly, because constantly किसी भी चीज को करना असंभव है. It is, I mean, commonsensical to understand कि constantly कोई चीज हो ही नहीं सकती, because then it is no longer.
How do you define constantly? Like 6 to 7 days तो मैंने भी
in your waking, let's say 17, 18 hours, 16 hours, all the time it is going on. How?
तो ऐसे 6 to 7 days I can vouch कि I have experienced this, but not for months or years.
Right. But anyway, मतलब that's why I mean I put my head on the line basically and said कि ये हो जाता है. If you do this Narayana, and with the, see, again, I might be constituted in a certain way because of this life or because of past lives. Everybody is constituted. ऐसा नहीं कहना चाहिए कि बिल्कुल different है, otherwise तो there is no meeting point. But just try it. जिसको ये ठीक लगता है, सूट करता है, they can try, and of course some perseverance will be needed. I am finding this, and again ऐसा नहीं है कि मैंने ये किया पहले वो theory मुझे पता थी, and then not the case. You simply, it's something which happens to you, you glimpse something out, and then when you read this you feel, oh, this might be a way, and this is what that symbol in our culture stands for कि नारायण, मतलब आप सोचते हैं ना कि why is just chanting one thing all the time constantly, नारायण 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 क्यों कर रहे हैं? I think it symbolizes कि this is one of the ways of finding the inner divine. This is my guess. इसमें बहुत ज्यादा मैं
इसमें एक चीज ये कहना चाह रहा हूँ कि I think you took this train कि जब मैंने भक्ति वाला बोला तो you took this off कि japa you are equating with bhakti. I don't think japa is necessarily related to bhakti. Japa can be a very ज्ञान yogic process also.
Can be, I agree.
हाँ, तो इसलिए मैं कह रहा हूँ
आप ज्ञान योग का एक मंत्र ले लो, आप हम ब्रह्मास्मि ले लो, आप उसका जप कर लो, आपको उसका रियलाइजेशन.
हाँ, मैं वही कह रहा हूँ. तो ज्ञान, सो अगेन वो मेरे क्वेश्चन से थोड़ा डिफरेंट है.
मैं जस्ट से समथिंग लोगों के बेनिफिट के लिए. श्री अरबिंदो in the jail, when that thing burst upon his vision, do you know what he was meditating upon? Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma.
Yes.
These 3 words from the Chandogya Upanishad. He was meditating, contemplating on this, and through the power of the mantra, I am sure the mantra's power is involved, and of course through his own concentration and contemplation power, it burst upon him, and that famous Uttar Para speech is the result.
Yes, तो मैं वही बोलना चाह रहा हूँ कि मंत्र एक प्रैक्टिस है विच इज, जो मैंने आपको बताया ना, विटनेस कॉन्शियसनेस, it is as much of a technique as witness consciousness is, क्योंकि witness consciousness relies upon you standing back from the flux of nature, and slowly when you withdraw your assent from the flux of nature, the flux of nature slowly loses its power and settles down. That's one thing. Mantra does the same thing. Mantra just basically, instead of standing back from the flux of nature, it introduces an element into that flux of nature, which is the sound.
And it can also separate you from the flux of nature. What the mantra can do is, it can reverse the flow of that flux. कि अगर वो फ्लक्स अभी बाहर की तरफ था, it can inwardize your consciousness.
Let me complete. So वो होता है उसके कारण, but the thing is कि witness consciousness is a bit abstract for a lot of people. Like it comes naturally to me, इसलिए मैं ज्यादा प्रैक्टिस करता हूँ. But मैंने जितने लोगों को बताया, they just don't follow that. तो वो उससे आप परे खड़े रहो तो वो सेटल डाउन हो जाएगा. बट मंत्र के पीछे बेसिक साइकोलॉजी ये है कि मन को ही यूज करके मन के परे जाना है. मन को ऑलरेडी साउंड्स क्रिएट करने की आदत है, so just introduce a new sound and slowly you know it will replace all other
but
sounds.
The power of this and all this is मतलब corroborated by Sri Aurobindo in several letters.
Yes, let me complete. So the thing is कि मंत्र को करने के भी कई भाव हो सकते हैं. एक भक्ति वाला भाव है जो श्री अरबिंदो ने प्रेयर के लिए लिखा है कि if it's done on the crest of emotion, मतलब उस तरह. एंड दूसरा है थोड़ा ज्ञान योगिक, जैसे प्रॉब्ली श्री अरबिंदो खलवामृतम भ्रम वाला कर रहे थे. तो वो मंत्र का तो एक प्रोसेस हो गया. आई मीन वो आप भक्ति में यूज कर लो, ज्ञान योग में
वो एक चीज और बोलते हैं, और यू कैन रिलाई जस्ट ऑन द पावर ऑफ द मंत्र इटसेल्फ.
यस आई नो
लाइक जिसको क्रिप्टोग्राफी में बोलते हैं ना, ब्रूट फोर्स मेथड ऑफ ब्रेकिंग अ कोड.
यस तो वो तो खैर अलग प्रोसेस हो गया. मैं कह रहा हूँ जैसे विटनेस वाला एक प्रोसेस हो गया, मंत्र जब भी एक प्रोसेस हो गया, यू कैन यूज इट फॉर भक्ति, यू कैन यूज इट आउटसाइड ऑफ भक्ति. बट मैं भक्ति के कोर क्या कहते हैं assumption की बात कर रहा हूँ, that just by having an emotion you will transcend. That's what I am asking कि वो कैसे इंश्योर करता है. Let's say बहुत सारे भक्त हैं जप नहीं करते हैं. Are you getting to my point?
I think जो उसकी I think that feeling and emotion and श्रद्धा needs to be attached. उसके बिना वो transcendence नहीं होगी.
अच्छा ठीक है. I mean yeah, I can say that also कि even
for example, जैसे आपने ISKCON का example दिया था, my educated guess would be कि if somebody were to arrive at the realization of the inner divine by doing the Hare Rama Hare Krishna mantra, simply that will not be sufficient. He will have to be a serious student of the Gita, meditate on what the Purushottama is, think of him in all these ways, and through this combination and वो जो नाम की power है, by that if he is sincere, ultimately what matters is sincerity. In an
yes, exactly. Also, that's what my problem with that thing is, that you know, this path has a very high potential.
It's 9:14. वैसे तो we already overshot the time by 3 minutes. किसी और का कोई question या कोई doubt, कुछ sharing है? Because it should not be. Yes, Yogesh bhai has to say something.
Yeah. So Anmol, if you look at the gist of what we read today,
yes, I'm showing it on.
Beat the path of devotion or beat the path of knowledge. The third being Karam Yog. If you see the best effort that a person puts up with whatever be the outcome of life, second by second, if you are in equanimity, because that's what it's saying, that the universe is always perfection in bliss. If you go by the 3 states that you talked, all happening simultaneously, which is, you said that, look, it's Sat Chit Anand. That means the awareness is constantly there of the divine, and there is a joy and a bliss with it, right?
The divine being aware of himself is blissful in that awareness.
Correct.
And even when you say this, so because we are in the mental domain, that is why we are breaking Sat, Chit and Ananda and, using language of human language simultaneous. Human language cannot be simultaneous. Human language has to be successive. So we are saying that becoming aware of himself, and by virtue of that awareness, he is blissful. But the fact is that he is self-existent, self-aware bliss, and these 3 are inseparable. That is the reality.
So the partial, because the word that came up, it said partially or fully. I can understand this if it's fully. How can the partial also give you this experience? Isn't that
No. यहाँ पे वो बात कर रहे हैं, takes possession partly or wholly of the human consciousness. Wholly माने कि once and for all, it has taken hold of the human consciousness. Basically, the human has been replaced by the divine. Okay?
Okay.
Now, I might say this. Please remind me if I forget. In one of the amazing letters of Sri Aurobindo, he talks about the Vedic yoga and how in the Vedic yoga the gods used to descend and ultimately the personality is replaced by the god. So in that case, he's
Right.
talking about God, small g. Here what he's talking about is capital G, और वो कोई replacement भी नहीं है, because a person ascending and into the divinity is not called avatar. You and I, if we reach the divine consciousness, we will not be avatars. Okay? Avatar
Right.
is a descent. When that unborn and that totality and that ultimately ineffable, anirvachniyam, when that assumes a human form to lead the evolution forward, then it is called an avatar.
So the partial here means that he takes over it partially for some
Partly.
period and some
For
period it's
period,
not.
periods. Or Chaitanya
Right.
ka is the only example really that comes to mind. Ki for hours, let's say, or minutes or hours, he is totally possessed and he is radiating that light, and people are offering pranam to him. He is Krishna. He is Krishna. That is why he is called also Krishna Chaitanya. ISKCON वाले जो हैं और इन आजकल की जो वो डिवोशनल पोएम उसमें सॉन्ग्स वगैरह में when they say Krishna Chaitanya together, they mean Chaitanya Mahaprabhu only. They don't mean that Krishna who is conscious. No. उसका मतलब चैतन्य महाप्रभु ही होता है. तो he is Krishna, but then in other moments when that consciousness goes away, और इसका भी rationale श्री अरविंदो ने बताया कि why it was like this with him. It was like this with him because his aim was mainly to give the example, to establish the example of the ecstatic bhakta. And if all the time he had remained in the divine consciousness, that object would have been forfeited. बिकॉज उनका मेन ऑब्जेक्टिव था एक्सटैटिक भक्त का एग्जाम्पल सेट करने का, और उस तरह की एक्सटैटिक भक्ति और उस तरह का इलान श्री अरविंदो बोलते हैं वो चैतन्य के पहले नहीं था. बट देन अगेन इन मोमेंट्स ही इज कंप्लीटली गॉड. You can nobody can say that he's anything else except Krishna. वो कृष्ण ही है ऊपर से लेके नीचे तक, and he's like that for hours. He's radiating light एकदम से फटा पड़ रहा है. तो
Beautiful.
ये एग्जाम्पल है. बट द पॉइंट हियर अगेन इज यहाँ पे इट्स नॉट रियली अबाउट द पार्टियल और होली. पॉइंट ये है कि टू अंडरस्टैंड, एंड अगेन इट्स नॉट एन इजी कॉन्सेप्ट टू अंडरस्टैंड. You have to begin, have some kind of faith, and you have to think. And mostly see, in spirituality, one does not understand things by the mind. Okay, one understands things by the growth of the inner consciousness, and that growth of the inner consciousness happens only through sadhana, yoga, sincerity. There is no other. तो इसमें वो अवतार, इन पिछले वाले में, इस वाले में, अगला वाला पैराग्राफ में भी वो अवतारहुड के ऊपर ही कवर करेंगे. उसका जो लास्ट सेंटेंस है दैट विल बी लाइक वन ऑफ द मोस्ट प्रैक्टिकल सेंटेंसेस वील टेक अवे फ्रॉम दिस बुक. कि अवतार को आप समझिए कि अवतार क्या है, और वो अवतारहुड का जो वैष्णव फॉर्म ऑफ वेदांतिज्म है उसने सबसे ज्यादा क्लियर फॉर्मुलेशन दिया है वगैरह वगैरह. ही इज बेसिकली बिल्डिंग अप sort of a faith in avatharhood. He is presenting the doctrine of avatharhood. Avatharhood के ऊपर there are 3 full chapters in this book. 3 full essays.
Wow.
Possibility and purpose. Yes. पहले का नाम है possibility and purpose. दूसरे का नाम है process. और तीसरे का नाम है divine birth and divine works. There are 3 full chapters on avatharhood in this book.
Right.
Avatharhood is in fact one of the most important teachings of the Gita. मैं शुरू से बोलता आ रहा हूं फर्स्ट क्लास से प्रैक्टिकली कि द भक्ति दैट इज प्रैक्टिस्ड इन इंडिया, द भक्ति विच इज डायरेक्टेड टुवर्ड्स भगवान, भक्त और भगवान, दीज आर पेयर ऑफ वर्ड्स. ये भी आप समझ लो, भक्त और भगवान, दीज आर पेयर्स ऑफ वर्ड्स. ठीक है, जैसे शक्ति और शाक्त होगा, भगवान और भक्त, दीज आर पेयर ऑफ वर्ड्स. लूजली, उनका रूट सेम नहीं है. उसका रूट होता है भज, होता है भक्त का रूट होता है भज, और भगवान का जो रूट है वो अलग होता है. इट इज भग प्लस वत करके बनता है. मैं संस्कृत के डेप्थ में अगले सेशन में जाऊंगा भले ही. बट द भक्ति दैट इज डायरेक्टेड टुवर्ड्स ईश्वर, गॉड, भगवान, जो सबसे मतलब यूबिक्विटस काइंड ऑफ भक्ति है इन इंडिया, उसका आधार ही आपको समझ में नहीं आएगा अगर आपको अवतारहुड नहीं समझ में आएगा, अगर आपको गीता का पुरुषोत्तम नहीं समझ में आएगा. इट इज समथिंग विच इट्स फैसिनेटिंग, अमेजिंग, मतलब क्या कहना चाहिए, वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग टू थिंक अबाउट. मदर जो बोलती हैं कि हार्ट के अंदर एक वॉइड होता है जो बिना भगवान के लव के नहीं भर सकता. ठीक है, तो व्हेन यू स्टार्ट थिंकिंग अबाउट दिस पुरुषोत्तम, भगवान एटसेट्रा, स्पेशली इन अ डिवोशनल वे, तो आप देखते हो कि आपके हृदय का वो गैप भरने लग रहा है. इट्स ऑल अ वेरी ब्यूटीफुल प्रोसेस विच यू कैन ऑब्जर्व इन योरसेल्फ.
Beautiful.
है ना, और ज्यादा नहीं.
I think the answer to my question is in the mother. Now I remember the mother booklet. I think japa is not the core thing. The core thing about bhakti is that you are full of
Feeling.
thoughts about the divine. So basically,
Bhavasamanditaah.
it
गीता में word
replaces your
आता है.
normal consciousness.
Yes.
So I
Bhav-
just to relate from here,
Yes.
in ancient India, people used to keep idols, and murtis were not for the purpose of just worshipping constantly till the end of your life. You were supposed to imbibe the qualities of the murti, and once you had become one with that deva, you
विसर्जन भी कर सकते हैं.
Visarjan. So Tibetan Buddhism, like Vajrayanists, still have that process alive. They the British, the Westerners called it the deity yoga. So they often take sometimes a deity or sometimes their own guru, and they replace all their mental chatter with the mantra of the deity. They replace their image, the subconscious image of their body, with the image of the body of the deity, and their surroundings with the palace of the deity.
बहुत ही
And when
important
this
thing बोल रहे हो. Very very
jhana has fructified, then they practice deconstructing the deity, like our own Paramans, Ramakrishna Paramans did when he broke the idol of Kali
जो
in his mind.
एग्जांपल जो कॉन्सेप्ट और एग्जांपल जो अर्पण दे रहे हैं ना, इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बिकॉज दिस इज द होल थिंग इन योगा. मैं सावित्री के वो 5 लाइन फिर रिपीट करता हूँ. सब कुछ तो जा चुके हैं अर्चना जी वगैरह. अ म्यूचुअल डेट बाइंड्स मैन टू द सुप्रीम. ठीक है. इसीलिए वो जो इटर्नल नारायण है एटसेट्रा, जब वो इस वर्ल्ड में आता है तो जब तक नर का फुलफिलमेंट नहीं हो जाता तब तक वो नारायण भी अनफुलफिल्ड रहता है. दैट इज वाई द डेट इज म्यूचुअल. प्लीज अंडरस्टैंड. A mutual debt binds man to the supreme. ठीक है. His nature we must put on as he put ours. जो अर्पण ने अभी बोला है कि जब तक आपने उस डिविनिटी के नेचर को पुट ऑन नहीं कर लिया, एंड टोटली समग्रम माम गीता कहती है. द गीता डज नॉट डील इन पोर्शंस एंड दिस एंड दैट. यो माम नात्वाति तत्वतः. तत्वतः का मतलब होता है इन माय ट्रू प्रिंसिपल्स. समग्रम माम का मतलब होता है कंप्लीटली. राइट. सो a mutual debt binds man to the supreme. His nature we must put on as he put ours. नारायण अगर नर बना है तो नर को भी नारायण बनना पड़ेगा. ठीक है. His nature we must put on as he put ours. We are sons of God and must be even as he. His human portion we must grow divine.
Knowledge must grow in us, bliss like an ocean, might like a titan.
Yes. His human portion we must grow divine. Our life is a paradox with God for key. वही जो सेकंड सेंटेंस में आया था कि जब तक आपने गॉड को अपने अंदर नहीं ढूंढ लिया, आपका जीवन आपको समझ में ही नहीं आएगा. इट विल रिमेन अ रिडल. इट विल रिमेन मोर देन अ रिडल, पैराडॉक्स, विरोधाभास. जब तक दैट इटर्नल कंपेनियन विद इन यू, दैट गॉड, फ्रेंड, हेल्पर एटसेट्रा, टिल इट इज नॉट फाउंड. एंड द श्री अरविंदो जो अपनी टीचिंग में बताते हैं, हिज एम्फेसिस इन मतलब प्रोग्रेसिव स्पिरिचुअल दिस थिंग इज first on the realization of the inner God. Then you can say, if you want to put it 1, 2, 3, because see, this is how he puts it: psychic, spiritual, and supramental transformation. So naturally it comes to the inner divine, the divine basically above the head, and that which is beyond everything, transcendent, uske nature ko imbibe karna. ये मतलब again this is roughly how it is. हाँ, exactly.
Another small metaphor came to my mind because I was reading Dante's Divine Comedy. So Dante's Divine Comedy also, has 3 levels of basically. The first one is purgatory. First one is hell. Then there's another section of the book is about the purgatory where you are purified, and the last level is heaven, and there are levels of heaven. So, if you take a higher reading of either our texts which describe hell and purgatories or of Divine Comedy, you're not punished for the sins you have committed. You're basically already in punishment for the divine qualities that you do not have. And as you imbibe them, especially purgatory में तो यही है कि आपके अंदर आलस्य है तो आपको ये punishment मिल रही है. If you lack compassion तो ये punishment मिल रही है. Slowly you're shaped into the divinity itself. Nature is bound to make you perfect.
इसमें बहुत ज्यादा मतलब एक मतलब one of the Isha Upanishad जो writings है, for example, Sri Aurobindo की, where one of the words, Sanskrit words, old Sanskrit word he gives for sin is दुरीतानी. ठीक है. जो आजकल का वर्ड है दूर हिंदी का, वो ओरिजिनली वहीं से आता है. इट्स नॉट डिफिकल्ट टू सी द कोरिलेशन. व्हाट इट मींस, आपके अंदर जो डिविनिटी है, ठीक है, जितना आप अपने कुकर्मों की वजह से उससे दूर हैं, टू दैट एक्सटेंट यू आर लिविंग इन सिन, एंड दैट इज द पनिशमेंट. There is no other punishment needed. If you are disconnected from the divinity within, you will become devoid of consciousness, bliss, life energy, etc., and will sink into कंफ्यूजन, डाउट, इन द वर्स्ट केस डिप्रेशन, सुइसाइड एटसेट्रा आल्सो, ऑल बिकॉज अंदर की जो डिविनिटी है उसके साथ कनेक्शन कट गया, आप उससे दूर हो गए हो. सो द डेफिनेशन ऑफ सिन इन द वेदा, लुक एट हाउ
Sri Aurobindo himself has explicitly said this. Somebody asked कि आप ये करते हो तो इस पाप की सजा ये मिलती है, तो उन्होंने कहा the law of karma is not so exactly mathematical. The general punishment for being more asuric and sinful is that you will descend more and more into the asuric nature away from your divinity.
Yes, और उसमें कृष्ण का आता है 16 चैप्टर में कि जो नहीं सुधरते, जो आसुरिक नेचर को फॉलो करते जाते हैं, क्षिपाम में जस्तम अशुभान आसुरीष्वेव योनिषु आसुरीम योनिमापन्ना मूढ़ा जन्मनि जन्मनि माम अप्राप्य कौन्तेय ततो यान्त्य धमाम गतिम, वो उनको फर्दर एंड फर्दर डार्क बर्थ्स में वो चलते जाते हैं. मतलब वो जब उस पे आएंगे, इट्स इन द 16 चैप्टर के लास्ट में आता है, विल कम देयर, बट इट इज देयर कि वो उसका बट नेचुरल रिजल्ट होता है कि यू बिकम मोर एंड मोर, यू फॉल इनटू द पिट बेसिकली. तो
Yeah, but Anmol, just
that is
one
what is
question
living
here.
eternal hell, nothing else. Hanji.
Yeah, Anmol, when you look at a tragic event in any individual's life who may be spiritual, when you go through a hardship, like so many people lost their lives in that air crash, right? For any person who's lost family members there, even if he's connected and he was a bhakta, was connected, this loss is obviously a shattering event that you have to deal with. तो आप तो इसको हेल ही बोलेंगे जिसको कोई ऐसी पीड़ा के
देखिए,
थ्रू.
जहां तक गीता की भाषा में, अगर गीता का जो स्टूडेंट होगा, ठीक है, सबसे पहले गीता ये सिखाती है कि आप अमर हो. तो इवन जो उसमें भुन गए प्लेन क्रैश में, उनकी केवल बॉडी जली है, उनका अन्नकोश वगैरह प्राणकोश वगैरह जला है, बट दे आर द सोल विद इन देम, द देही, दैट इज नित्य, उसको तो कुछ नहीं हो सकता, राइट. और गीता सबसे पहले ही ये बोलती है, ऐसा कभी नहीं था जब तुम नहीं थे या वो नहीं थे या मैं नहीं था, ऐसा कभी नहीं होगा जब तुम नहीं होगे या मैं नहीं होगा या वो नहीं होंगे. तो देर इज नो क्वेश्चन टू ग्रीव. ऑफ कोर्स इट कैन साउंड वेरी ब्रूटल एंड क्रूअल कि ये क्या बोल रहे, बट दिस इज द रियलिटी. एंड बार बार मैं बोल रहा हूं, द गीता बिगिंस विद दिस. कृष्ण जब बोलना शुरू करते हैं, दिस इज द फर्स्ट थिंग दैट इनफैक्ट वो, यू आर टॉकिंग लाइक अ पंडित बट यू आर टॉकिंग फूलिश थिंग, दिस इज व्हाट ही सेज टू अर्जुन, राइट. और जहां तक वो पेन वाली बात है, सावित्री के अंदर एक लाइन है, पेन इज द हैमर ऑफ द गॉड्स स्कल्पटिंग मेन टू ग्रेटनेस. तो वो इन द प्रोसेस, यस, पेन इज द हैमर ऑफ द गॉड्स स्कल्पटिंग. आप श्री अरविंदो की लाइफ देख लो, आप पांडवों की लाइफ देख लो. श्री अरविंदो व्हेन ही रिटर्न्स टू इंडिया, he finds out that his father has died because his father got the wrong news that Sri Aurobindo was in such and such a boat, whereas Sri Aurobindo was on the other one. और वो जो बोट थी वो सिंक हो गई, and the father died taking the name of his son on his lips, and the son comes and he can't even meet his father, that too after 14 years. Imagine what a pain it must have been.
Correct.
इंग्लैंड में जब थे, मैं बहुत उसमें नहीं जा रहा, फॉर वन होल ईयर he was not having food to eat, man. He was not having an overcoat to wear. Starvation. और लंदन की सर्दी में ओवरकोट ना मिलना, मतलब 13 साल का बच्चा यार, बढ़ती उम्र में खाने को नहीं मिल रहा उसको. बट दिस इज व्हाट मेड श्री अरविंदो श्री अरविंदो. तो वो एक प्रोसेस होता है. अब आई मीन, अब मैं क्या बोलूं, आई कैन कोट फ्रॉम श्री अरविंदो सेवरल थिंग्स की, why is the divine, why he puts us through the furnace and this, and he says that it is like this because आपने अपने आप को रिफाइन नहीं किया है. आप अपने आप को रिफाइन करो, फिर आप देखोगे कि जो डिवाइन के मेथड्स हैं आपके साथ, वो इतने ब्रूटल नहीं होंगे. हिज मेथड्स विल आल्सो विल इंप्रूव विद यू, सॉरी,
Right.
राइट. तो दैट्स व्हाट इट इज.
Makes sense.
मेक सेंस.
Right.
ठीक है, चलो, लॉन्ग वन टुडे, 1 hour 20 minutes ऑलमोस्ट. शैल वी क्लोज नाउ?
Yeah.
All right, all right. So see you tomorrow. Just be silent for the 15-20 seconds at least. Let's meet tomorrow.